Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. John Lavis as Distinguished Leader in Evidence-Informed Policymaking and the Director of the McMaster Health Forum. So thank you so much, John, for coming to our IS-PEC Talks, Bridging Evidence to Policy and Practice in 15.
My pleasure.
As the co-chair of the Global Commission on Evidence to Address Societal Challenge, you've been instrumental, really, in reshaping how we think about using evidence in decisions worldwide. So first, can you give us a brief overview on that?
Sure. So the Global Evidence Commission was created back in 2021. At that time, as you can recall, we were partway into the COVID pandemic. There were many positive lessons learned, but also many failures in how we were using evidence to address the pandemic. And so a number of us who were involved in a global network called COVID-END, the COVID-19 Evidence Network to Support Decision Making, said, let's do a once in a generation commission to really look at this issue. We've been talking about this stuff for decades. How do we really accelerate action, improving how we use evidence to address societal challenges? So we set up the Global Evidence Commission. We had 24 commissioners from around the world produce the report with the recommendations in January of 2022. And that had all of these really important recommendations. But in the following year, we realized we really needed to focus in on a couple of high priority areas. So we focused on formalizing and strengthening national or local evidence support systems. So that would be very relevant to Israel as a country or Canada as a country. Enhancing and leveraging the global evidence architecture. And that's about making it easier for us to learn from around the world and put that global evidence alongside our local evidence. And the final is putting evidence at the center of everyday life, which is really about how do we help everyday citizens use evidence in their everyday life. So we produced then updates in 2023, 2024, and then in the last kind of 6 months, or maybe about 6 months ago, I should say, we were very focused on trying to wrap up that work with a consensus statement to really get funders around the globe to start to invest in this space. So we built consensus with more than 100 authors from around the globe on the Show Me the Evidence features. If you Google Show Me the Evidence, you'll see two things. One is our work, one is Barack Obama's or somebody's work on the Barack Obama presidential administration. So read ours, much shorter, and it talks about how we do much better in this space. So it's a vision for what the future could look like. And I think it was a really lovely legacy of the work of the Global Evidence Commission. And perhaps as we'll come to later in the conversation, I think it unlocked the door for some really significant funding to start to come into the space.
Wow, we always talk about windows of opportunity. So
Yeah,
I know you've been working on this for decades, and as difficult as COVID was, it really was the incredible window of opportunity to push
it was.
forward a lot of this work. Wow.
Absolutely.
So now you're working on the Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. So for that piece that I mentioned, the second priority of enhancing and leveraging the global evidence architecture, something that really caught the eye of many funders was we can do much better in how we learn from others around the globe. And with artificial intelligence coming along, able to help us with some aspects of the work, we really should be looking for a step change improvement and make syntheses of what we've learned from around the globe and how it varies by groups and contexts much more readily available on all the major societal questions of our time. AI enabled, where AI can support different steps in the synthesis process in a way that is safe and responsible, but also not introducing it prematurely. So there are aspects of the work where AI is not sufficiently well developed to use it with confidence. So funders embrace this idea and the Wellcome Trust to and with my immense gratitude to them, they made an intention to fund announcement, 45 million pounds. So I think that's roughly 60 million US dollars for an initiative that would really support a step change improvement in that global evidence architecture. In parallel, the UK, United Kingdom Research and Innovation Group announced a call for about 11 million pounds, and now many other funders are coming to the table to work out how do we support this bigger undertaking. What has just begun or is beginning this month is a 6-month planning process. And the goal of that process is to generate a costed list of everything we need for this much more enhanced global evidence architecture. So those of us like you, Moriah, in Israel, me in Canada, other colleagues in other countries, in future, when we get questions from policymakers, we can take our local evidence, but much more easily pull down this evidence from around the globe. So for anybody who's interested, there's a website. If you Google the phrase building a global evidence synthesis community, you'll be brought to the website. You can sign up for alerts. There will be 6 groups that are working through the planning process. Each will produce a report, 5 different reports over the 6 months. So keep an eye out if you're interested in methods innovation or the use of AI or how to work with policymakers. There will be work emerging and your feedback would be warmly welcome. So do keep alert to this work. A lot of things are going to happen in the next 6 months, and then the funders will, based on what they learn from this, issue funding calls so that people can then start to more fully build out this infrastructure.
Incredible, really incredible. So you mentioned, in the 6 different work packages, one of them related to policymakers. I mean, it's all related to policymakers, but there's a lot of critics that say, well, we don't need the policymakers know what doesn't work, or they claim they know what works and what doesn't work. But they choose not to implement it or they choose not to adopt it. So how would you respond to a policymaker who says, I know the evidence. It's not like I need the evidence. We decide, to go down a different policy route.
Yeah, well, what I often say is, are you sure you know the evidence? Because very often there's conventional wisdom or their trusted advisor has suggested we know something. But there's very, very few questions out there where there is an absolutely definitive answer. It works in all contexts. Everybody agrees on it. And science changes as well. So what we often say is, science is a fast-moving field, policy is a fast-moving field. Why wouldn't you look for the most recent summary of what we've learned from around the globe, how it varies by groups and contexts? Israel, like every other country, is unique in a variety of ways. So absolutely use your local evidence, but also just think about learning from others. But even if you are sure that you've looked at the evidence, then wouldn't you want to be able to cite a robust summary of it to back up your claim that this is what works? And then I guess the final thing that I say is we know that people have been democratically elected to make tough decisions, and many factors drive policymaking. So evidence will not always triumph, but we do really want it to be one of the factors that is being considered. I think the one other thing that I continue to struggle with is how positive do you keep that messaging? What we often say to folks is you can do this work better and more efficiently using evidence in your work. And it can be quite fast. But we always have to be clear that it's about getting the best available evidence, because you can ask ChatGPT, what do we know about X? But that doesn't mean that ChatGPT is drawing on systematically and transparently pulled together evidence. So you can stay positive and say we can do it faster and so on, but it's also, you have to be honest that you can do it with more confidence about the quality if you use the types of processes that we're talking about. And the difficulty then is people get nervous. It seems like you're critiquing their work. So we're always walking that fine line of being, cautiously encouraging them to think about different ways of doing things, questioning the certainty they may bring to a question, and being open to other ways that may be a bit more systematic and transparent, but increasingly are as fast as some of the other things that they do.
Okay. So what would you say is the biggest barrier when it comes to evidence-informed policy? I see a lot of efforts being put in with all these funding calls to, make the evidence more available, but is that the biggest barrier?
Well, I think, it's been a contributor, but I have to say, and you know this as well as I do, we continue to struggle day by day. It's the issue, the real challenges on the demand side from those policymakers to get them to be open to looking at evidence and to look at the type of systematically and transparently pulled together evidence that you and I are very focused on. So it's a struggle because if you think about a Ministry of Health, for example, or any other ministry, they're big, complex bureaucracies made up of many different people. People have their usual ways of doing things. They have their own views about the world. And it's almost like you need to re-prosecute this case over and over and over again. And sometimes you can turn somebody into an advocate for using evidence in their work, and then they're moved into a different portfolio, and you have to start all over again. So you were always looking for those champions in government who are much better positioned than we on the outside to bring their peers along and say to them, hey, you really need to pay attention to this stuff. This will help us up our game. And yes, it can move fast, just like we always need to move fast. So if I had to pick one, I would just say it's that ongoing struggle with building that demand for evidence.
And the way to do it, you think, is just speaking to the individuals that are in those positions. I just
Well,
wonder if there's a more systematic way to make it,
yep,
acceptable. And this is what need, like, like you just have to
yeah.
put on your seatbelt. You just have to you have to do X or Y.
No, it's a great question, Moriah, because I've been trying this for years, and then I went through a number of years where I became really focused on, well, let's change the rules of the game. So let's, in Ontario, for example, there was a time where people in the Ministry of Health had to fill out a form before it went to cabinet or to the minister to document how they found and used evidence. But those, it lasted for a few years and then it disappeared. At its best, it was only being used by part of the ministry. And the best advice that I got in the last couple of years was the then head of our Treasury Board Secretariat in the Government of Canada, who said to me, you know what, John, we can go in and put in place all of these rules, but they're going to be tick box exercises until you convince people this is a better way of doing things. So his advice to us was find senior leaders in these different government departments who are willing to pilot new ways of doing things. His sense was, and this is proving to be true, once people see it, and once people realize that it gives them much more confidence in understanding what we know, what we don't know, much more confidence in being able to communicate and so on, then they start to become advocates for it. So then we have senior leaders saying to their peers, you should look at this stuff because I wasn't convinced. We tried a 1-year pilot and it really turned our minds. So that's where we're currently going, less focused on changing the rules and more focused on showing through pilots how this can work and really add tremendous value. So we'll see whether this works. We tried one by one, we tried the rules, and now we're trying pilots to see if this is the way in. And then if they are successful, then the rules can be changed later.
It reminds me when I did my postdoc with you many years ago, we're not going to say when, but we were evaluating the extra training where people
Yes.
came in dyads, right? So the
Yep.
senior hospital administrator or family health team, and the one of the main findings was having the person go through that training and then sitting around the boardroom table saying, well, where they were the ones that were pulling in the evidence and where is the
Exactly.
evidence? And this is how we should be doing things.
Yes.
Yes.
100%
So
agree. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that
a long time ago.
a long
Okay,
time ago.
so looking forward, let's
Yeah.
say 2030. We're not going to go so far because we see from the past few years things can change
Yep.
at the drop of a hat. So
Yep.
looking ahead to 2030, what would success look like in this field?
Well, the piece that is so front and center for me right now is how the global evidence architecture could be situated in a way that just makes it so much easier for those of us who are working at the country or the local level. Because right now, if you want to use evidence from outside your own country, it is incredibly hard. You have to know which databases you go to. You may find a synthesis, but it may be 5 years out of date. Nobody's helped you understand what context the findings apply to, so you need to struggle through it. Where I hope we are is that for whatever the question is, all of the studies that have addressed that question will have already been identified. The data from them have been extracted. The quality assessment has been done. and I can pull it down and recontextualize it specifically for my country. There may be 100 studies out there. 20 of them may be relevant to the context in which I'm operating. 17 of them may be relevant to the context in which you're operating, Moriah. So you package yours, I package mine, and I put it alongside our local evidence, and then say to people, here's what we know locally, here's what we've learned from other jurisdictions. So that's where I'd love us to be. And I think it's going to be a big change in the skill sets of the folks like you and me who are working at that more national and local level, because we're going to have to get much more used to dealing with these streams of data, and then deciding what of it is going to be relevant to our context. So that's what success would look like for me in terms of the global stuff. Success for me in our own countries would be that we have a lot of these pilots that have converted a lot of minds, and we've started to change the expectations and rules work in, large organizations, including government. So this just becomes the new normal. You never, deal with legislation without legal review. You never deal with legislation or policy without a communications lens. There's certain things that we just normally do. Why wouldn't we just make this the new normal, that we have an evidence workup as a piece of the work? The global part will become much easier, and we can chip away at making it much easier to access the national and local evidence as well.
I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
really excited for all this. Okay, so one last question, even though we're at the
Sure.
15-minute mark. Sorry to our
Yep.
listeners. Most of our listeners will be young, early career researchers or knowledge brokers, really just starting out. What piece of advice would you give them?
Well, one piece of advice would be we have this rule in if you're you're renovating your kitchen or building a house, you work with what we call in Canada general contractors, somebody who doesn't just know a lot about being an electrician, but they know how to bring in the plumber at the right time, how to bring in all these different trades. I think that the folks who have that general contracting skill in evidence world are going to be incredibly sought after. So you may have been trained to be particularly good at organizational analysis or qualitative research or any number of other skills. Think about starting to build out your capacity to use some of these other forms of evidence, because I think that is going to be an extraordinary niche. To hear the question, realize we need qualitative insights, we need an evidence synthesis, we need an economic analysis, and then you can build out connections to the groups that can support it. So to me, it's a complementary skill set. Most of us get trained in very specific areas, but that generalist toolkit, I think, is just going to become more and more important over time. And I had the good fortune to work with many of your MBA students, and this is what I was telling them, and that was the focus of the 2 weeks we spent together. Think about building out some of your capacity to engage these other trades, because it's going to be a real game changer for you, and I hope an increasingly sought after skill set.
Yes, well, they do refer to that course a lot, so I think they gained a lot.
Great, super.
John, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, so I really appreciate it, and I know our
My
listeners
pleasure.
will really appreciate it.
Super. Great to have you. And I'm so impressed with the work of IS-PEC. It's been a delight to see you, Moriah, virtually, and to support IS-PEC. So keep
Thank
doing the
you.
good stuff.
Amazing. Thank you.